Yeah, pleasure to be here. I'm Asheem Chandna. I'm a partner at Greylock. I spend about half my time on security, half my time in other enterprise areas. Have been around security probably way too long. I was fortunate to be at Checkpoint Software very early when the company started many years ago now. And I think right now I'm on 3 security company boards, Palo Alto Networks, and then four company boards, Palo Alto Networks, Sky High Networks, Obsidian, and Awake.
Charles Beeler, I'm with Rally Ventures, early stage investment across the board in enterprise. About 25 to 30% of what we do is in the cybersecurity space, really based on what we see generally across enterprise, which is this massive digital transformation, which is driving substantial changes in security as well. Rally started in about 2013, and we have, at this point, 35 companies. I think 8 of those are security, so maybe 25% is wrong, but somewhere in that range.
Great, I'm Alex Dahl, the founder of 1011 Ventures, was an entrepreneur with PGP, Pretty Good Privacy. Before that, we are the industry's first venture fund who does 100% cyber. So we have a $100 million fund. We've made 11 investments to date. A couple that have been around the conference, companies like Cylance, Darktrace, Twistlock are a few examples.
Great, pleasure to be here. My name is Yoav Leitersdorf. I'm the founder and managing partner of YL Ventures. We are a seed stage venture capital firm, mostly focused on the Israeli market. Our seed rounds are fairly large, especially for that market, typically between $2 and $4 million. Cybersecurity is by far number one sector. Right now I sit on 4 cybersecurity boards. One of them I share with Alex and Charles here is Twistlock. We also have Karamba Security, which is an automotive cybersecurity company. We also have Axonius, which is an IoT security company, and a 4th one that's not been announced yet. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So in recent months, there's been some reports that investment VC funding for cybersecurity businesses has been down after a large boom in 2014, 2015. Has that been your experience? Have you seen funding dwindle a bit in the past year or so? And if so, why?
I'd say interest still remains, very high from everything I can tell. Just, both at and across all stages of the market. So I would actually say that I think interest is strong, and basically, if there are entrepreneurs looking to do new companies in security, they're going to find lots of folks that are interested in meeting with them.
Yeah, I actually hope the data is true, because I hope a lot fewer people are funding cybersecurity deals, because the need isn't going away. It's been argued as an overfunded space. I think it's a great argument to make in certain parts of the market, and maybe broadly. I'm guessing no one here, given where we focus, has seen a slowdown in opportunities come in, but I haven't looked at the broader data set to see. But again, if fewer groups want to do it, all power to them. Maybe you guys should stop doing cyber.
Yeah, right. I actually don't think that data is true. I mean, it feels, we see 300-400 business plans a year. All we do is cyber, so it's a decent proxy. There's about, some of the databases you track, and there's about 1,600 funded private security companies. There's sort of a natural death rate and on the low end, and then there's some, on the high end companies get acquired, so it nets out every year. I think what's happened more than funding going away, I think there's been some changes, some structural changes in who's been funding. I think if you go back a year or two, there was a lot of large venture capital firms sort of window dressing, saying, hey, this cyber stuff's sort of interesting, and it would be terrible if we have $1 billion fund and we don't have a cybersecurity bet, so why don't we go find 1 or 2 of those? We were sort of the original fund to do cyber. There's now 5 dedicated cyber-only funds. A lot of the larger funds have sort of realized if you don't have expertise, it's a very unique market to fund. It's very hard to assess what are going to be winners and not winners in cyber. It's a very specific, unique domain expertise, and I think a lot of institutional investors have realized without the right expertise, it's sort of dangerous to invest in, and that segment is sort of left. And at the same time, you've had a lot more people realize if they have the expertise, we can raise dedicated funds, or firms have built partnerships and dedicated resources from within their funds on cyber, which is, I think, what's needed in the ecosystem.
So definitely it's a very, very unique industry to invest in. I think it definitely requires very specific expertise. And I'm not sure I would agree with the data either, or your data. I would say maybe there are fewer rounds, but overall in terms of dollars, I think we're actually doing better than 2016, especially in Israel, which is our number one market. We're seeing fewer rounds. In 2016, we had 70 rounds according to our data. 2017, I think we're not tracking quite that far, but the sizes of the rounds are much larger, which gives, which basically kind of helps the market because it means that the best players get stronger with big war chests and long runways. And a lot of the other guys who might have Me Too type of plans or teams that are not as strong, they're not getting as much capital.
You mentioned there are areas that are potentially overfunded. What are some of the areas that are maybe underfunded at the moment? What are some of the future focuses on cyber that you're looking at and putting money into?
First.
Go ahead.
It's like asking us for our deepest secrets because. But what I will tell you is we'd love to see more plans in app security, for example. We've seen a couple actually in this conference that were very interesting. I'll mention Shift Left, not our company. I thought that was great. Those areas, I think there could be a lot more done. IoT security seems like it's overfunded, but I think what's been funded over the last few years isn't necessarily as relevant as what today's needs are. And so we're actually seeing in IoT, whether it's automotive, medical devices, industrial, we're seeing pockets of really interesting stuff.
Those are exactly the two markets I would have said. The app side, helping developers be more effective in incorporating security into what they do when they build it the first time. And then on the IoT, there's plenty of companies going after it. We haven't yet gotten comfortable that anyone's really figured out the model. There's some interesting companies, but I think there's a lot more room, so I would have echoed it.
And an area I'll throw in, it's sort of been one of the conference themes, and it's an area we've just made investments, sort of addressing the skills gap, the million jobs too short, going to 2 million to 3 million, and how do you retrain the prior guest from AT&T was talking about, we can't just go hire, we need to train people up. So business plans and sort of things that help with training, workforce education about cyber, and I think an area where some of that's happened is sort of there's some social science companies doing sort of phishing, and you fish your own workforce. There's sort of 3, 4, 5 companies on that specific use case of training the workforce on anti-phishing. I think there's a whole set of plans like that will go to helping existing employees become more security and retraining existing employees and sort of limiting risk with training the employee base more broadly, I think is an area that could use some more ideas and plans.
Yeah.
And I can add briefly, and I would say I tend to look at things from the lens of more like what do the world's 20,000 largest companies want? So like really global 20,000. So with that lens, I would say that I think people are still very early in the move to the cloud. I mean, despite everything on the headlines, and so I'd say just as architecturally as more and more companies kind of continue down that journey, there's lots still to be done in cloud security. There's lots to be done around data security. So I can almost put them together. They're two different dimensions of, the architectural shift that's happening. I would say in email security, there's, 1 or 2 significant vendors. There aren't actually that many choices in the market. Just another theme I could, talk to that I'm sure everyone in the room touches at some level or is watching from different perspectives is just, applying, let's say, machine learning or data science, to large data sets and, using that to make security, better.
When you're looking for companies to invest in, I know we kind of associate VC with Silicon Valley, but are there other areas that are kind of hotbed for cybersecurity developments?
All right. So definitely Israel. Israel, I think, is the number one the number one market outside of the United States, which is the number 2 market in the world for cybersecurity. So once you take the U.S. out of the picture and you look at the world map, I mean, there's a lot of really great stuff in the UK. Maybe Alex can touch on that, and there's other pockets. But Israel is just a force to be reckoned with. Especially two specific intelligence units in the IDF, 8200 and 81, are just the 2 of them are churning out thousands of graduates every year who are, smarter than some of the best grads from MIT and Stanford. No offense. And they also come with practical experience, right? Years and years and years of working on the job, doing offensive cyber, defensive cyber. So we're just having a field day over there, looking at many hundreds of teams per year and picking out, the 2 or 3 that we want to partner with. But it's like, it's like a kid in a candy store over there.
Well, and it's interesting too, if you think about what's driven that, right, which is the defense side of it and the offensive side. So obviously Silicon Valley and Boston, but those are more because they're startup hubs. What we're also seeing, so DC, that area, there's a lot of opportunity because there are a number of very capable, smart people coming out of different agencies. Southern California, we've got SOCOM and some other groups down there, and now with companies like Cylance that have started, you've done a spin-off of a deal there. There are multiple others, so you're seeing pockets build, but they're building around people who have true industry experience. In a lot of cases now, I think increasingly important coming out of government as you're looking at these nation-state attacks, these advanced personnel. These are much more complex issues people are dealing with, and I mean, there's no doubt that Israel will continue to be a hotbed because they've really led the way on this on both sides, and the net result is those people. I don't know if Dean's here, but a great example of a phenomenal founder, a really compelling person who came out of the Israeli Defense Forces, and it's a no-brainer to go start a business.
And then just like Israel and DC on that same theme, in England it's GCHQ spin out. There's a whole accelerator group. Darktrace was actually formed at Cambridge University, a combination of Cambridge University, the old Cambridge, not the new one in Boston, old Cambridge, and then GCHQ came together and sort of funded Darktrace founders. And then Digital Shadows is also another company that we invested in that was formed and incubated at Canary Wharf in the UK. The UK government's done a lot to support cybersecurity, and I think London's sort of a bit of a natural place. And the only other one not mentioned already in the panel, I think that you do have to sort of watch geopolitics, which is interesting. In venture, you usually aren't reading about geopolitics as much as you have to watch it a little bit in our space. The only other one I think that'll sort of play a role potentially as the Asian hub of our companies. We have 11 companies, 5 of them located in Singapore. All 5 of them have gone to Asia and set up shop. Singapore sort of also making its place known as sort of the hub. So I think you're Singapore, Tel Aviv, UK, and then sort of the 3 US hubs we talked about, I think are sort of coalescing as the cyber hubs.
I do think we have some time for audience questions if anybody wants to jump up to a mic. Otherwise, if I'm an organization, I'm looking at different startups that are offering their services, how do I know that offering is going to be there in a year? How do I know that what I'm getting into is going to continue to exist?
I think it's a huge challenge because I feel for the customers that are out there and any that are in the audience, because there are just so many companies and so many products, and it's just very, very unclear even for people that like us that or others that are doing this for a living in terms of diligencing these people and technologies, and so for customers where all these little companies are calling on them, it is very, very challenging. That said, what I would say is, there's probably 2 things I would look at. One is I would look at the quality of the founders, and it's not always easy for a customer to get to the founders because you may have salespeople calling on you or whatever. But if you can get to the founders, I would look at the quality of those people. And the second thing, which may be self-serving, but I think it is, I think there is some merit, is I would try to understand who the backers are, and just to get some sense of the company. But I think the other piece also is when these often successful companies then get acquired, and so there's another set of dynamics that happen after that as well. So I think it's a challenging dynamic overall.
I think also when you look at if you're really thinking about buying from a startup that's at risk of going out of business in a year or 2, there's 2 things that are going to be driving that. One is a need, so it's a unique solution. Maybe you're comparing it against bigger companies. Small startups have a harder time there, but I think the philosophy of the organization, so Jim Routh, who's the CISO at Aetna, has a very strong philosophy around buying from startups and knowing that of every 10 we buy, they're not all, 1, going to work, and 2, they're not all going to be around. Hopefully it works out where the ones that don't work also don't stay around, but that's not always the case either. But their view is we're going out and buying solutions that we need, We know they won't all fit. We're getting, frankly, a good deal because we're jumping in early, so we're negotiating a price that we couldn't get if we sat around 3 years from now. We're getting to have an impact on the future direction of their product development. So for them, going in early, say, we'll buy the product, maybe it would be $500K in 2 years, we'll pay you $150, but we also get to impact the direction that it fits better. So the ones that do work, they get tremendous value from it at a substantially lower cost than they would have paid. And again, some are going to fall off and they aren't going to work. I think both of those make sense. Make sure it's a smart team, make sure that they've got the right kind of backing, but beyond that, if it's really a need that you have, take a risk on it, but expect that in return, if you're a large company, you're going to get discounts and you're going to get to have a say in kind of the future direction. And that can have a much greater impact, even if only half of those end up working down the road.
And by the way, if the startup gets acquired, that's not necessarily bad news. I think in 3/4 of the cases, company gets acquired, and then guess what? Your counterparty is now a much larger multinational with a bigger balance sheet that can serve you better. I think in 1/4 of the cases, a company gets acquired and then gets completely repurposed to something else, maybe an internal function, or and then customers end up churning. But getting acquired is I don't think is bad news for the customers.
There's a lot of, like if I open up my inbox right now, I have tons of pitches from startups that offer cybersecurity products. And those are tools that companies can use. But how do you affect cultural change within companies to look at security in a different way? There's been a lot of conversation about like DevOps and things like that, just changing the way that organizations approach security. What's VC's role in that?
I would say actually just as a starting point, I would say actually what happened to the Equifax CEO in the last 24 hours. I wonder how many, let's say Global 2000 CEOs are taking note of that. Because,
right?
Obviously that's a very unique company, and data is everything there, and data privacy. But when you have a board saying, "Hey, I got to let the CEO go,"
But it's
right?
interesting though, right?
I mean, the next CEO is going to pay notice and say, "Hey, I better watch this as well," right?
But the same thing happened at Target, and here we are a couple years later, and it's just, I think a lot of them don't think it's going to happen to them. You see it on boards. I mean, we've all sat on public boards and seen it. It's the number of people around those boards who actually understand what the hell is going on in cybersecurity or actually want to pay attention to it. Very few people get brought onto boards for that expertise. There are a few companies, Capital One's done it recently. We're bringing, not advisory board, but board members who have that experience and understanding. They have the former CISO from Amazon, Tom Killalay, is on the board. That kind of expertise where you're at a level where you can actually start to ring the bell and say, you all need to pay attention. To be honest, I don't think it's something that VCs can impact from the seats we're in. We can with the companies we're at, but it is a fundamental change. You want to go through this massive digital transformation. Dane talked about it from McKinsey. If you're not including in that process what your cybersecurity plan is as an organization, then as the CEO, you're not doing your job. As a board, you're not doing your job. And frankly, you should get fired if something goes wrong because you allowed one half of the equation to happen without figuring out the other half. But I think it's a much broader issue than, at a much higher level, frankly, than we typically see startup companies being able to affect it. I don't know. I mean, there's Cyber GRX.
With Sarbanes-Oxley coming then?
Yeah.
We're gonna have the same kind of thing?
Not to pitch Cyber GRX, but this idea of starting to do third-party vendor assessments. Right, actually making people think through what are the decisions you're making, not just in cyber, but is that the right HVAC vendor to work with? Are they secured and protected? By the way, that's the target issue, right? So it goes well beyond kind of what's our framework, what are we doing, to really holistically, how are we thinking about our business, how are we thinking about our partners? Every single person who walks in the door of my company and plugs into a computer, who are they, what can they access? So it is a big challenge, and it needs to be part of a broad conversation in any strategic decision. So there are some companies, I guess, that are starting to approach it, but they've got to get adopted.
Yeah, and I think the way finance did it was risk-based, and I think you heard a lot of this conference talk about it's shifting to, and then at board level, it'll be risk-based, right? We're not going to ever get everything shut off, but the way we're evolving is we're going to be able to look at, just as in Sarbanes-Oxley, where you look at your accounting and your financial accounting controls. I think that is sort of the model and best practices that we're going to look to in cyber, where you're going to look at what are your cyber controls and what's the risk-based approach to mitigation. That's sort of the thing that we'll start to monitor and be able to quantify, same way we did with sort of accounting risk historically. I think there's a lot of similarities. Hopefully we don't have Sarbanes. Hopefully we can do it ourselves as an industry.
I don't think that solves it either if they do it.
I think we're out of time, so thank you all for participating. This has been a great conversation.
Take a knee.